Hi everyone, this is Mrs. Musoff, and today we're going to be talking about a formula to find the sum of a geometric sequence. So remember, a geometric sequence is one where you multiply the same number every time. All right, as opposed to an arithmetic, which was adding. So multiply by the same number. All right, now this formula looks a little more complicated, but it's one less step than the other formula because you don't have that a sub n term that we had before. All right, so this is to find the sum of a geometric sequence, a certain number of terms in a geometric. We'll use this formula right here. Okay, but I'm actually going to rewrite it right next to it, a little bigger, and with some extra parentheses that'll make sure that you get the right answer when you type it in your calculator. All right, so the nth sum, we're going to start with the first term. A sub 1, remember, is the first term. All right, and then the parentheses are good, 1 minus. But the problem is that sometimes r is negative or a fraction, and then it can be really important to have it in its own parentheses. So I like to put r always in its own parentheses. That way I never forget. And then in the denominator, I like to put that in parentheses as well. Okay, and this will ensure that you always get the right answer as long as you have these extra parentheses in place. All right, the nice thing about this formula is everything should be familiar. We already know A1 is the first term. We know R is our common ratio, which remember you find by doing the second number divided by the first number. And we know N is the number of terms. Okay, so all we have to do are find those three pieces of information and plug them in, and a lot of this just ends up being making sure we type it in our calculator correctly. Okay, so let's try an example right here. Number 1, we got 3 plus 6 plus 12 plus 24 plus ... So it tells us the first piece of information, n is going to equal 8. So there's only two more we need. We need a sub 1, and we need r. All right, a sub 1, remember, is the first term, so that's going to be 3. R we have to find by dividing. So I'm going to divide here the second number divided by the third. 6 divided by 3 is 2. And just to double check myself, I'm going to do the same thing over here. 12 divided by 6 is 2. And maybe just to double check one more time, 24 divided by 12, also 2. All right, now it confirms that R is going to be 2. So now we're going to plug it into this formula right here. Okay, so I'm going to have S sub n, but instead of n is going to be 8. So it'll be S sub 8. On top is a sub 1, so the first term, which is 3. And then parentheses, 1 minus, and we'll put r in its own parentheses, so 1 minus 2, to the n, so to the 8th, and then close it up. And on the bottom is 1 minus r in its own parentheses as well. And then all we have to do, whoops, not r though, we know r, silly, so r is going to be 2. And then all we have to do is type this into our calculator. You should have your calculators out just so you can make sure you're typing it in right, because that's the hardest part of these problems. All right, so try typing it in alongside me. We've got, let's see, 3 parentheses, 1 minus, another parenthesis for r, and then to the, what was it, 8th, perfect. Move over and close it up. And then I'm going to divide by, include another parenthesis, and do 1 minus 2. All right, close it up finally and press enter. And there's our answer, 765. So what that means is the sum of the first 8 terms in this sequence would equal 765. So you could just keep multiplying by 2, get the first 8 terms, and then add them up. And that would be a good way to double check your answer. Should not be the way you start doing it because it takes a long time. And if you try to do it like that the entire test, you might not have enough time to finish it. But it is a good way to double check your answer if you're not sure you're doing it right. All right, let's do this problem on the side first. So number 3 it says, but let's do that one first. All right, same kind of idea. We're going to find S sub 7. So n is going to be 7, right? And it actually gives us that information along with the first term and the ratio. So it doesn't give us the sequence, but it does give us all the pieces we need. And if we wanted to, we could turn this into a sequence, right? Because the first term is 2. And since r is 4, that means I'm multiplying by 4. So I'd do times 4 is 8. Times 4 is 32, etc., etc. All right, so you could always create the sequence if you want. But it's much easier to just start with these pieces because then I'm just plugging it in. So I would do a sub 1. Here, maybe we can get it so we can look at it. There we go. A sub 1 and then parentheses 1 minus r to the n, where r is in its own parentheses 2, to the 7th, and then divided by parentheses 1 minus r. Okay, if you wanted to make it easier to type in, less parentheses, you could do this piece in your head. Just remember, smaller minus a bigger is negative, so this is going to be negative 3. Which you could type instead. I don't know, for me it's just easier to just type it all in. So that's what I'll do. Alright, I'll do 2 parentheses 1 minus, give r its own parentheses to the 7th, and then divide by parentheses 1 minus 4. Alright, so 10,922. So S sub 7 is 10,922. So that means if you were to add up the first 7 terms in this sequence, right, they would add up to 10,922. If you don't believe me, try it yourself. Okay, let's do a couple more. So same kind of thing here. Alright, this time they did give you the sequence. They said n is going to equal 7. We know our first term is 2. So the only little tricky part is we got to find r. So I'm going to do second number divided by first. Negative 10 divided by 2 is negative 5. And then I'll just double check it. 50 divided by negative 10. That's also negative 5. And you could keep double checking it with the rest if you wanted to. But I'm feeling pretty good. 50 times negative 5, that seems like it'd be negative 250. So r is going to be negative 5. So let's plug it in. S sub 7 equals 2, and then times parentheses, 1 minus, put r in its own parentheses, to the 7th, and divide by 1 minus negative 5. Alright, and once again we'll type it in. So 2, right, yep. 2 times parentheses, 1 minus, r gets its own, negative 5, there we go, to the 7th, divided by, and then more parentheses for the bottom. And there's our answer, 26,042. Alright, so as long as you know where to put each number, it's really not too complicated. You just have to make sure you've got that formula in front of you. Alright, same kind of thing in number 4. So again, they give us n. I can find the first term, that's right there, negative 90. But r I'm going to have to calculate, so r is going to be the second divided by the first. Now be careful here. Smaller divided by bigger, that's going to be a fraction. So make sure you use your calculator to double check. 30 divided by negative 90. And I know a lot of people want to use this and think it's okay to just call it like negative 0.33, but that'll give you a different answer. So whenever possible, I always try to change it into a fraction. And that way I don't have to worry about that rounding error, we call it, where you round and get a different answer. Alright, so I'll just use negative 1/3 because I can type that whole thing in. Alright, and you can double check it with the next one, negative 10 divided by 30. So that would be negative 10 divide 30. 30. And then I'll just change it to a fraction right away. And that's negative 1/3 also, so I'm feeling good about this negative 1/3. Okay, for fractions and negative numbers especially, it's really important to use those parentheses when we do our formula. So this will be S sub 4 equals negative 90 times 1 minus negative 1 divide 3, so negative 1/3, to the 4th, divided by 1 minus negative 1 divide 3. Okay, and this one's a tougher one to type in, so let's double check it. Negative 90 parentheses, 1 minus, another parentheses for negative 1/3, to the 4th, and then divide by 1 minus negative 1/3. Okay, that was a lot. And anytime you get a decimal, I always try to change it to a fraction just because it's cleaner to write. So negative 200 thirds. right, and there's our answer. Now that's S sub 4. That means it's the sum of the first 4 terms. And let me just fix that. It kind of looked like an 8. I don't want that. So 3. All right, now this is the sum of the first 4 terms. Take a look at what we had. We already had the first 4 terms. So if we wanted to, we could have actually just added this up in our calculator. Negative 90 plus 30 plus, what was it, negative 10, and then plus 10/3. And it should give us the same answer. All right, so again, you can always do that to double check yourself if you wanted to. All right, go ahead and flip it over. Let's try just a couple more, and then we will be done. So again, here is that same formula. Let's write it down again just so we've got it in front of us. A sub 1 is the first term, R is the ratio, and N is the number of terms. So if we were to try these last two, same idea. All right, they give us N. A sub 1 is the first term, so that'd be 128. And R we're going to find by dividing. So 64 divided by 128. We'll type that in our calculator. 64 divided by 128. And I get 0.5, which should be 1/2, but I'll double check. Yes, it is. All right. And I'll do it one more time just to be sure. 32 divided by 64. So 32 divided by 64. And that's also 0.5, so that'll be 1/2 as well. All right, so we'll substitute it into our formula. S sub 8 is going to equal 128 times 1 minus 1/2 to the 8th divided by 1 minus 1/2. All right, again, I can't stress enough how important it is to keep the parentheses in these right spots. So 128, oops, let's clear this up there. 128 times 1 minus 1/2 to the 8th divided by 1 minus 1/2. 255. Okay, hopefully you're getting the hang of it by now. I'm going to go ahead and skip this last one and just focus on this last piece. It says, your mama says she can never remember the difference between a problem that is arithmetic or geometric. Can you tell her the difference and what to look for? Well, I know it's been a while since we've really gone over this, but hopefully it's something in the back of our head always. Remember, an arithmetic sequence is one that adds each time. And by adds every time, I mean the same number. Adds every time the same number. Whereas a geometric is one where you multiply by the same number every time. Multiply by same number. All right, so in terms of what to look for, if you find a D that's the same, so the second number minus the first number, and if that's the same as the third number minus the second number, right? If that matches, then that would be arithmetic. If those don't match, then you can try doing the same kind of thing with your ratios, which just means divide instead of subtract. So second divided by first, if that's the same as the third divided by the second, right? If those match, then we have geometric. All right, so that's the easiest way to figure that out. All right, thanks for listening. If you have any questions, write them down. Make sure you ask your teacher. See ya.